Andrew Yang came here and we had a phenomenal event. It's from the bottom of my heart that I want to thank him. Today, we actually hosted 30 candidates as of today here in the city of Laconia, a first for our city, a first for our state, and it's the first time that this county actually has a say in what happens in our primary system in the media's eyes. So thank you for coming, it means the world, and without further ado, thank you, Andrew Yang, and also thank you to my friend Steve Martin for being here and keeping Laconia in the forefront. Thank you so much.
All right, real quick, how y'all doing today? Good. He's going to be out in a minute. He's actually in the building, which I do this a lot. When he's in town, sometimes it's a half hour where I got to pretend I'm not killing time. But today he is in the building, so let's warm up. How are you doing today? That teaser is true. He'll be out in a second. Let me ask, how many of you have not seen Andrew speak in person before? Yeah, that's what I like New Hampshire primary week. We were just at Colby Sawyer in New London, and each time he's been here since I started with him almost a year ago, the percentage of people that have not seen him before actually goes up. And it used to be 85% Yang, 15% Yang curious. Last time, about 3 weeks ago when he was here, it was about 75% Yang curious, 25% Yang. That event we just came out of, this one here, I'm not a mathematician, though if you're Andrew Yang supporter, that kind of honorary mathematician designation occurs. This one is like 90% Yang curious. That's good, because what we find is when people get to experience Andrew in person, it usually ends up going really well, which is how somebody a year ago had an article written in the Washington Post saying, "Random man running for president." Can't be as recently as last week, all by himself, 4th place nationally in national polling, raising millions of dollars at $30 an increment. He's had verbs named after him. That's, you get yanged. When your friend is yang and then they meet you and you become yang, that is called getting yanged. So I suspect most of you, you're at least, how many of you would you maybe describe yourself as yang curious? Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, we also call that future yang. No, he's great. When I think about the future of the country and what it can be, youthful and diverse and entrepreneurial, innovative and energetic, we have a chance to actually do that in a transformational way for our country. It's a big deal. It's not enough to just beat Donald Trump. We have to replace him with something that you can really be proud of and that can represent what the best of America's next 20 to 40 years can be. This is that kind of moment. And so the good news is you don't have to wait much longer. I don't have to filibuster for 25 minutes. You get to listen to the next president of the United States, because I think he's right over there. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Yang.
Yeah!
Intro and for being such an awesome public servant. Thank you, Carlos. It's great to be back in New Hampshire. Oh my gosh. I am so excited. The voting happens a week from today, and you know what? They're actually going to know who freaking won. Really, what happened in Iowa is not a great thing for our democracy writ large. But I have to say, it will make New Hampshire's voice all the more powerful a week from today. So to the extent you like that part, it's a thrill to be back here on so many levels. I actually went to high school right here in New Hampshire. How many of you do that? Yeah, I graduated from Phillips Exeter Academy in 1992. They had me back to speak a few months ago, and I said I hadn't been back since graduation because I didn't really have a good time at the school. And then the student body erupted in applause. I didn't know that was going to be the reaction. So after Exeter, I went to Brown University, and then I went to law school, spent 5 unhappy months as a lawyer, and then left to start a business. How many of you have started a business or organization or mailing list or club? So if you have your hand up, you know a couple things. Number one, it's much harder than anyone ever lets on. And number two, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you say?
Great.
Great. My company too went great until it failed. My parents told people I was still a lawyer, but I had been bitten by the bug. I worked at another small company and then another. Then I became the head of an education company that grew to become number one in the United States and was bought by a public company in 2009. But 2009 was the wake of the financial crisis. It was a very, very tough time in so much of the country. How many of you were here in New Hampshire in 2009, not really ago? Do you remember that time? And I thought I had some insight as to why our economy crashed in 2008. It was because so many of the wannabe whiz kids that go into Exeter and Brown and Columbia with it went straight to Wall Street and helped create mortgage-backed securities and financial derivatives and these exotic financial instruments that had helped tank our economy. So I thought, what a train wreck that is. That's the opposite of what you want people to do. So I thought, well, what's the most positive, generative thing you could have people do? And the vision I came up with was to head to places like Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, and New Orleans to help grow businesses. How many of you all work in a nonprofit right now? How many of you all volunteer in a nonprofit? You should just raise your hand to that second one. That's like, are you nice? I was nice that one time. So here's where my wife's understanding comes in, where I came home and said, hey, I want to quit my job and start a nonprofit to help create thousands of jobs in the Midwest and the South primarily. And the way you start a nonprofit, the way I started a nonprofit, was my wife and I put some money in to a 501c3 we formed, and then we started calling wealthy friends with this question: do you love America? And the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And then I said, at least $10,000. And so then you raise a couple $100,000, that grows to the millions. We helped create thousands of jobs around the country over the next 7 years, to the point where I was honored multiple times by the Obama administration. I got to bring my wife, Evelyn, to meet the president, so my in-laws are very excited about me that week. But unfortunately, I had this sinking feeling traveling the Midwest and the South that the water level was going down, not up, in so many communities. How many of you are from the Midwest and the South? So you may have a sense of what I mean there. And then Donald Trump won the election in 2016. You all remember that night well, I'm sure. How did you react when Donald Trump won? Shock, dismay, surprise. Someone said bourbon. To me, his victory was a very clear turning point for our country. That tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as our president, which is not business as usual. We've been offered a whole series of explanations over the last number of months, years even, as to why Donald Trump won in 2016. I know you've seen the same things I've seen. Go ahead and shout out the explanations we've been given. Businessman, not a politician. Oh yeah, no, so yeah, he had some inheritance going.
You're an outsider? He's an outsider?
Outsider, not a politician. Drain the swamp. Disillusionment, Russia. Hillary, emails, DNC, Electoral College, that set of reasons. Sure, like negativity was attractive to some people. I think someone said racism, like that's somewhere in there. Fear-mongering, immigration, fear. So these are the reasons that we've been presented as to why Donald Trump won in 2016. But I'm a numbers guy in Laconia. The numbers tell a very clear and direct story that many of you may find familiar as to why Donald Trump is our president today. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years in this country. And where were those jobs primarily located? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, all of the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And this may be familiar to some of you because we did the same thing in the northern part of your state a number of years ago. We eliminated more than 10,000 manufacturing jobs in New Hampshire. And if you've been to those towns, after the plant and the mill closed, then the shopping district closed, people left, the schools shrank, and that town has never recovered. I saw the same thing play out in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, the changes that eliminated those manufacturing jobs are now shifting and accelerating in other parts of our economy. How many of you noticed stores closing around where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing?
Amazon.
Amazon, that's right, online. Amazon's like a spaceship sucking up $20 billion in business every year, closing 30% of America's stores and malls. The most common job in our economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. What is her next job when the store closes? Waitress, we're not sure. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That is the math, Laconia. 20 billion out, 30% of stores closed, most common job starts to disappear, we get zero back. These are some of the changes you can see around us, but the changes are more widespread than most of us realize. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the software or bot on the other end, you probably do the same thing I do, which is you dial 000, say human representative, until you get someone on the line. Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that, because that software is miserable. We're all like, a person works at this company somewhere, and I'm going to find them right now. But in 2 or 3 short years, Laconia, the software is going to sound like this. Hello, Andrew, how are you? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, efficient. You might not even know it's software. What will that mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work in call centers right now making $10 to $14 an hour? I just spoke at a group of 70 CEOs in New York City of big companies, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with AI and software? And guess how many of them said yes, they were looking to do that? All 70 of them. The fact is that they didn't raise their hand, they could be fired the next quarter. Because that's the system we have built. We're trying to optimize for the bottom line, and the bottom line, in many ways, will be getting rid of people and bringing in some software. How many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? It's the most common job in 29 states. My friends in California are working on robot trucks that can drive themselves. They tell me they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania last month with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this maiden voyage? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, the story comes up. What will this mean for the 3.5 million truck drivers in our country, or the 7 million plus Americans who work at truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal each day? Laconia, we're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say 4th Industrial Revolution? 5 seconds ago, right? Just now. And I'm barely a politician. So 2016, Trump wins. 2017, I'm looking through the data saying, oh my gosh, there's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement towards Trump in that area. And this transformation is about to accelerate because the technology is getting smarter and more capable all the time. And we feel lucky just to stay about the same day to day. You know what I mean? Like if we didn't get dumber on a given day, it's probably a good day. Well, the tech's getting smarter all the time. So I went to our leaders in DC and I said to them, we're going through this transformation, we're scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have very little to do with. If you go to a factory in Michigan, you don't find wall-to-wall immigrants doing work, what do you find? Wall-to-wall robot arms and machines doing the work that people used to do. So I went to our leaders in DC and I asked, what are we going to do to help people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I asked, what are we going to do? Retrain's definitely the most common. How many of you heard this? We must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Learn to code, essentially. But I'm the numbers guy. I checked out the studies. Do you all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs? Not very. 0 to 15%. They were a total dud. The reality is almost half of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs left the workforce and did not work again. Of that group, almost half filed for disability. We then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in these communities to the point where America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row. First time in 100 years. Last time that happened was the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go back 100 years to find a point like this. So when I said this to the folks in DC, one of them said something that brought me here to you all today. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in DC will do anything about this. Because fundamentally, Washington, DC is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we would do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back with the wave in 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's been 2 years in the making. You're the wave next week. Where we can actually make this case to the rest of our country that this economy has to actually work for us and our families and our towns and our communities and not the bottom lines of these huge companies. Because you have corporate profits at record highs and your life expectancy is going down. Like, which do you listen to? If you're us, you listen to our own life expectancy. That's pretty common sense. If you're Washington, D.C., just follow the money. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? We're not sure. But business is awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. Laconia, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to distribute the swamp. Why would you employ hundreds of thousands of government workers in the most expensive city in your country? Why wouldn't you move some of those jobs to Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire? This would save us billions of dollars immediately, and I would argue it would improve the decision-making of these government agencies because they actually live someplace normal, as opposed to a DC bubble where they just talk to each other all the time.
For sure.
I'm for term limits for members of Congress. And Laconia, I have a magic way we can get this passed. If I'm your president a year from now, I will go to Congress and say, hey, we should have 12-year term limits for members of Congress, both houses. So let's pass this, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that?
Yep.
They'll pass that the next day. They'll say, we do this for the American people. Because there's no skin off their back. Like, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect the person who comes in after me. But eventually they'll phase out and we'll end up with a legislature that actually turns over in a real way. These are some of the big changes we must make, but we also need to make changes that actually make this economy work for us and our families. If you're here today, you know that I'm championing a very dramatic sounding proposal that every American gets $1,000 a month starting at age 18. Raise your hand if you knew that, first of all. Now keep your hand up if this seems too good to be true and almost impossible. Right, so for those of you who still have your hands up, I completely understand. But this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country. He called it the citizen's dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we just celebrated, was fighting for this when he was killed in 1968, guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists endorsed this plan in the 1960s. Milton Friedman's the patron saint of libertarianism, among other things. He likes Milton. So this was so front and center that it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon Family Assistance Plan, with a guaranteed an income level for all Americans. And then 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend, where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they pay for it? And what is the oil of the 20th century?
Technology.
Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A new study just came out that said that our data, your data, is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If your data is now worth billions of dollars a year and you are not seeing a dime of it, then where's all that money going?
Facebook.
Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, and the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying nothing or next to nothing back into our society. This is why you have this sinking feeling that you're leaving your towns and not coming back. This is what we can change. We get the value that's leaving, in some cases literally being made off of your data, get that value and return it to you in the form of a dividend of $1,000 a month. This would be the trickle-up economy, from people, families, and communities up, particularly because after the money is in your hands, where would it go? How much of it would stay in New Hampshire? Most of it. Not all of it, you might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League signups, and local nonprofits and religious organizations. This is how we actually reorganize the economy so it's working for us and our kids, and not the companies that are just getting richer and richer. Raise your hand if you're a parent like me and my wife Evelyn. If you're a parent, you have had this sinking feeling that our kids are inheriting a future that is less bright, less secure, and less prosperous than the lives that we have known. Why do we feel that way? Because it's true. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there was a 93% chance you're going to be better off than your parents were. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what we want to leave to our kids. But if you're born in the 1990s in the United States of America, you're down to a 50-50 shot and it's declining fast. That is why the parents feel the way we do. That is why young people feel like the deck is stacked against you in ways it has not been for previous generations. Because it has been stacked against you. Laconia, this is what we must change. This is why Trump is our president. This is why so many of us feel like we're losing and falling behind. Imagine a country where we can look our kids in the eyes and say to them, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country will invest in you and your future. Do you think that would be a game changer in terms of the way Americans actually feel? We can make that happen next week. That is the joy of this election. We can't act like Donald Trump is the source of all of our problems. He is not. He is the symptom of a disease that has been building up in our towns and communities for years, for decades. That is what we must get to the work of curing. We have to start curing the disease instead of lurching at the symptoms. The political parties have been playing you lose, I lose, you lose, I lose for years now. But who's been losing that entire time? Us. We have been losing. You have record high corporate profits in the United States of America right now. What else are at record highs? Deficit, drug use, stress, suicide rate, student loan debt, mental health problems, depression, anxiety, medical expenses, medical bankruptcies, financial insecurity. We all know this. We all know these are record highs. You know what are at record lows in the United States of America right now? Starting a business for a young person, getting married, having a child, all the things you associate with a thriving, healthy society are now at record lows in the United States of America. This is what we've allowed to happen. Our way of life is sinking deeper and deeper into the ground, while the companies just keep getting richer, and our government just follows the companies around and cleans up after them, and tries to make sure that they can get even richer than that. That is why Trump is our president. This is what we must change. Instead of pretending that what's good for the companies is good for us, we should measure our country's progress by how we are doing. Our health and life expectancy, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, our childhood success rates, our clean air and clean water, the proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances. These are the measurements I would use, and the great thing is I don't even need Congress for this. I can just go and say, hey, guess what, GDP, 100 years old and really out of date, kind of useless, gonna keep going up even as our way of life deteriorates. So we're gonna upgrade it to actually tell us how we are doing, and I'll present the real numbers to you every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck in the State of the Union. Laconia, you can't solve a problem if you don't even know what it is. And that's where we are right now as a country. If you had the right measurements, you would see we have a mental health crisis on our hands. We have a wellness depression. We have a civic engagement depression. And one of the hidden victims, so there's so many victims of our measurement problems. My wife is at home every single day with our two boys, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our current economic measures?
Zero.
Zero. She gets a zero. How about every other stay-at-home parent in the country? How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? How about volunteers and activists trying to do something positive? Most coaches and mentors looking after our kids? 95% of artists, unfortunately. You know, one hidden victim in this, Laconia, how about local journalists? We have put almost 2,000 local newspapers out of business over the last number of months because all of their advertising revenue went up to the internet. You can't run a paper on that. What does not function as well if you do not have local news?
Democracy.
Democracy, because how can you vote on what's going on in your town if literally no one is covering what's going on in your town? And there are 200 counties right now in the United States that don't have a local paper anymore. These are the things we're supposed to value most in our lives. Our children, our families, our communities, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. They're getting zeroed out because we've been collectively convinced that economic value and human value are the same things. And that if the market says you have no value, then you have no value. And Laconia, what we have to say loud and clear a week from today is that we each have intrinsic value. Our kids each have intrinsic value as Americans, as citizens, and as shareholders of the richest country in the history of the world. That is what we can change. I'm not running for president of the United States because I dreamt about being president of the United States. Those were not the conversations in the Yang household. My parents were not like, you're gonna be president someday. They were like, you're terrible, go clean your room. I'm running for president because, like many of you here today, I'm a parent and a patriot. I can see the future that lies ahead for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept.
Yeah.
They deserve better. We should do better. We must do better. So this is the vision that we can take to the rest of the country. The number one criteria that Democratic voters have for the nominee is what? Beat Donald Trump. That's very practical. I agree with that. People who are betting money on these things have me as the heaviest favorite in a head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump out of anyone in the field. I'm 3-2. Everyone else is even money at best. Now, why do they think that I am such a clear favorite against Donald Trump? How confusing. Sure. Well, no. So here are a couple of data points you'll all enjoy. Number one, in one survey, 18% of college Republicans said they would choose me over Donald Trump. Right here in New Hampshire, 10% of Trump voters in the state said they would choose me over Donald Trump. You know who has figured out that I am not the opponent he wants to see in the general? Donald Trump. I am the only candidate in the field that he has not tweeted a word about, because he knows I'm better at the internet than he is. And his most potent attacks are what? You're a corrupt DC politician, which does not work on me at all. And his team knows this. One of his senior advisors was quoted on video in a private event saying, if there's any candidate we're worried about, it's Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
And one reason he does not want to run against me is that I'm not running against him so much as I am running against the reasons why he's our president today. Donald Trump is our president today, Laconia, because he had a very simple and powerful message for our country. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America's already great. You remember that? It's been a long 3 years, I know. But it's now coming to an end.
Yeah.
That response did not work for many Americans because the problems in our communities are all too real. We have to acknowledge their reality and depth and severity, but then we need real solutions that will actually move our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Laconia, you know we have to do the opposite. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Let's go, Andrew! Make America think harder!
Make America think harder, that's right. It's your job a week from today to move this country we love so much, not left, not right, but forward, and I know that's just where you will take us. Thank you all so much. I think we have
This is a sensitive mic, so don't be too loud.
Hello, Mr. Yang. Thank you for being here. My question is this. I've been voting for 40 years, and I've been hearing the same things for 40 years at every election. We're going to fix healthcare, we're going to fix the economy, we're going to fix immigration, we're going to fix a lot of things. 40 years hasn't been fixed. And I've been listening to everything you've said here, but the one thing nobody seems to talk about is personal responsibility. We talk about companies like Amazon, for example, and that they're putting mom and pops out of business. But what we don't say to any of us is, the reason Amazon does so well is because we all buy from Amazon, and we don't go to mom and pops. We have healthcare problems in this country because many of us choose a lifestyle that's not healthy. We have student loan debt because there are many kids who are choosing schools that they can't afford, or majors that aren't going to earn them any money. But we don't talk about that. We talk about let government take over and we're going to retrain, we're going to redo. Government, if you poll most people, will say they have very little faith in government, and then we turn around and say, but hey, let's give them more responsibility. The responsibility is us. We have to know, we have to tell our kids, here's what you should be learning. Right now, for me, I would say trade schools. Things like that. If you want a mom and pop store to make it, you gotta shop at your mom and pop store. You gotta buy your local newspaper. But it's like all of the politicians, and because, sir, I know you said you're not a politician, but you're running for president, nobody says the unpleasant thing of, the government's not gonna take care of us, and it's not the government's job to take care of us. It's our job to take care of us, and we have to accept some of the responsibility of this.
Let me say, I absolutely love that set of ideas and agree with it completely. So I'm going to call out one of the core examples you put out there, which I completely agree with. We need more Americans going to trade school. We need more Americans seeking out apprenticeships and vocational tracks instead of going to college, as a great example. But only 6% of American high schools even offer trade school programs and apprenticeship programs at the high school level. So what we should do is invest resources in trade school and apprenticeship and vocational training programs. Only 6% of American high school students right now are in trade school programs or apprenticeships. In Germany, that's 59%. Think of that gulf. And there's certainly some individual choice you can make at age 13 or 14 saying, hey, I want to go down this direction. But it's a heck of a lot easier to make that choice if your school actually offers it versus your school just trapping you in a room with textbooks and a teacher pretending you're going to go to college. So we need to put more effective choices into people's hands through things like, hey, you know what? Like, more of our kids should be going to trade school, at least have that option. Then we need to make that option available for them. My flagship proposal of putting $1,000 a month into people's hands is because I agree with you fundamentally that we are better able to solve our own problems and build our communities the way we want than if the government were to come in and say, hey, do this, do that, do this. The tough situation that more and more Americans are in is that the choices are actually getting less and less meaningful for us. And by this, what do I mean? It's like, if you're making a certain amount of money and then I increase the cost of education 250%, I increase the cost of healthcare 250%, and then say, hey, like, make good choices. If you're an American making good, just like, wait a minute, like, my choices are getting lousier and lousier, has nothing to do with me, like, I'm just making it harder and harder. Or if you say to a person, like, hey, don't shop at Amazon, even though it's cheaper and more convenient, shop at your local store, and you're having trouble making ends meet, you're like, look, I can't, like, spend extra money and time patronizing my local business because, like, I'm having trouble putting food on the table, and, like, I have to stretch it as far as I possibly can. And the fact is, even if you did spend a little bit of extra money at that store is going to close anyway, because your individual patronage will not actually make a difference between that business's success or failure. So we need to put more agency in people's hands and then say, look, you know best how to improve your life, your community, your family, and give that power back to Americans individually. I agree with you 100%.
I'm coming back to you.
Mr. Yang, I'm a retired retired police officer detective. I learned that our lovely war on drugs was destructive, dysfunctional, and immoral policy since slavery and Jim Crow. What would you do differently?
Preach.
I love his T-shirt. It says "Cops say legalize heroin. Ask me why." I think we need to legalize opiates for personal use and not prosecute people for crimes of addiction. If they're profiting, if they're selling, they're dealing, they go to jail. But if they're struggling with addiction, we need to refer them to counseling and treatment and not treat it as like a personal crime. Because the fact is, why are so many of our fellow Americans addicted to drugs? There are a whole range of reasons. But a lot of it is that our government turned a blind eye to the dispensing of millions of OxyContin prescriptions, saying that OxyContin was a non-addictive wonder drug, when it turns out it was incredibly addictive. And so if your government screws up at that colossal level, then your government can't turn around and say, hey, it's on you that you got addicted, given that we literally like started putting these drugs into everyone's hands. And you know why we did it? Because Purdue Pharma could make $30 billion off of it, and our government at this point is, again, just riding shotgun with these companies. There were more opiate prescriptions in the state of Ohio than there were human beings in the state of Ohio pretty recently. And if you're a government and you see that state of affairs, who the heck looks at that and is like, yeah, that's appropriate? I mean, it's completely inappropriate. And so, if we screwed up to that level, I agree with you. The war on drugs, if anything, it should be the war on drug companies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know that communities here in New Hampshire have been torn apart. You've lost loved ones, you've lost friends, neighbors, children. Nothing can make that whole. But to the extent that we can give our people a fighting chance through access to treatment, that they might need to undergo several times, there's no certain path backwards, it's going to be a lifelong struggle. We need to make sure money's not the obstacle, just like the money wasn't an obstacle when it was time for these drug companies to make this blood money off of us. Like, money's not going to be the obstacle in trying to get people strong and healthy again. So that's where I am. I agree with the substance of your T-shirt. Thank you for everything you've done to keep us and our community safe over the years.
Thank you.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for coming here. Sorry, a bit nervous. My question for you would be regarding the salaries that politicians make up to president and how grossly inflated. What would you think about linking that to how America as a whole is doing? Not just to punish politicians for making bad decisions, but rewarding politicians with better pay for making better decisions for all of us.
Thank you. I have some strong feelings and ideas about how to get government working at a better level. One example where I did say that you should tie compensation to how your agency is doing is the VA. I've talked to so many veterans who are having trouble getting the care that they need, that they're owed, that the VA will keep them waiting for literally years, and they have no choice but to just be subject to that waiting list. And so to me, it's common sense where you should tie the VA administrator's salary to whether or not there are people on the waiting list for years and years, to try and create an incentive for them to actually be more responsive. And I said, look, if the waiting list is beyond a certain reasonable time frame, then we just need to pay for that veteran's treatment. And then we can use that as a way to like dock your salary if you're a VA administrator, because you're clearly not delivering the services that you're supposed to for veterans who literally gave their health in many cases for our country. As your president, I will pledge not to take any paid speaking fees for personal gain for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Culture in DC, it has to start at the top. You can't have the president just going around taking $250,000 for an hour's work and then have the rest of the government just look around being like, oh, is that how we do things? It's like, yeah, I guess it is how we do things. We have to make being a high-level government regulator a one-way street. Essentially say after this, you cannot work for industry for at least 10 years. Now, if you're going to have people join your government who cannot work for industry for 10 years, then you have to pay them a bit more, actually, because you have to say to them, look, you're not going to have to worry about actually, like, just making a living. Because here's the tough truth, Laconia. The day someone joins government in a senior role, a clock starts, like a timer goes on their head. They're going to be in that role for approximately, let's call it 2 years. So what happens is every major company is there saying like, hey, You want to join us after your 2 years are up? We'll pay you 5 to 10 times more than what you're getting paid right now. Half the time that person used to work for one of those companies to begin with, they join the government, and then someone's standing there with a bag of cash being like, hey, join my company. What's your natural incentive if you're that person? Go easy on that company. Go easy on any company that might throw you a bag of money. That's one reason why in this country today, if you have money on one side and people on the other, who's winning?
Money.
The money. Because like no one has any incentive to go against the money. The only way you can create that incentive is if you cut people off from the money. Say, look, you get into this senior role in the government, we're gonna pay you enough so you'll be all right. Not like loaded, but all right. But in return, this is a one-way trip. You join this like no industry for at least 10 years afterwards. And if you can't work for industry for 10 years, you become useless to that industry. Because a lot of that value you have, the reason they pay you beaucoup bucks on the way out, is for your relationships. It's because you can call the government and be like, hey, now go easy on my firm because I work here now, and I gave you your job. That is the way this government is working right now, the revolving door. So if you're gonna change this, you have to set the culture from the top. After I'm your president, I will do your work for 8 years, and then I will leave that town the next day, and you will never hear from me again. Yes, so there are things we need to do to try and line up government compensation. It's one reason why term limits are so important. Someone who worked on Capitol Hill told me that being a member of Congress is the coolest, highest paying job that 90% of those people are going to ever have. And so they want to cling to that job forever, which ends up changing their incentives from doing work on our behalf to doing whatever they think they need to do to try and keep that job and stay in DC. So this is one reason why the structural problems are so important. But thank you, it's a great question.
All right, final question.
Thank you for coming. Question on basic income freedom dividend and paying for it with the VAT. How, even were the Senate to flip by a couple of votes, how do you get big things like that through realistically? And you have other proposals similarly, but particularly in that, in a over my dead body, taxes environment. I mean, maybe you can play reconciliation, but we do these things by one vote, and the other side digs in the heels, and it gets undone in a few years.
Well, thank you for the question. You're spot on so many levels. These are really good questions. I want you to play this out. Andrew Yang wins New Hampshire next week. This idea takes people by storm. It's like, hey, we should have the economy working for us and our family. It's like, we do produce all this value that we're not seeing a dime of, et cetera, et cetera. I become your president a year from now. Again, I'm a miserable matchup for Trump. I can beat him very, very cleanly. The harder part is actually becoming the nominee, honestly. It's actually trickier than beating Trump. All right, so I become president, inauguration, everyone's excited about this dividend. Democrats are thrilled that we have the White House again, so they're excited to move on our flagship proposal. But how do Republicans and conservatives feel about the dividend itself? Alaska, that's had this dividend for almost 40 years, deep red conservative state. It was passed by a Republican governor. And the Republican governor made this case, which is going to seem sort of familiar. He said, a lot of oil money here in Alaska. Who would you rather get it? The government who's going to mess it up somehow, or you? And the Alaskan said, us please. And he was like, I thought so, and then here we go. So this actually is a line of thought that would be very appealing to at least, let's call it 10 to 20% of Republicans and conservatives. Particularly if they represent rural areas and red states on the interior that have gotten blasted by a lot of these economic megatrends. They'll look up and say, wait, this is an enormous win for my community. And cash is very hard to demonize. Can you imagine someone making that case? Like, this money's gonna hurt you. It's like, don't think it will. You know? Like, it turns out when people have money, it's like, it's pretty good. So how to pass it? Passing the dividend is very, very doable, and passing the VAT is actually also very doable, because when I talk to Republicans about Amazon paying zero taxes, how do they react? Even Republicans aren't like, yeah, Amazon paying zero taxes. Like, you know, none of us likes taxes, but also none of us thinks Amazon should be paying less than everyone in this room. No one thinks that makes sense. So if we put a mechanism in place where people feel like it's more fair, the Republicans are not in love with the big tech companies right now. You know what I mean? Like they're actually quite concerned about it. So if you have a position in place where we're starting to get some of the gains from That's bipartisan. And you know, Laconia, one thing that's interesting, half of these techies are actually supporting me in my campaign because they know it's very bad for everyone if Americans don't feel like we're actually participating in the innovation economy. They know eventually that's gonna blow up in their faces. Not all of them, but half of them are like, I'm on board, this makes sense. They're from the Midwest, they like saw what happened in their hometowns. Like they are game to actually make this an economy that works for everyone. So I can get bipartisan support for both ends of it.
We have to hit back on the road soon, but let's give it up one more time for the President of the United States.
Yeah! Let's go, Andrew!
All right, so Andrew's got a few minutes to mingle and take some photos, and then we're gonna do some press. You gotta hit the road. Let's say about 5-10 minutes, guys. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see you on February 11th.
There you have it, Yang Gang. Another awesome stump speech by Andrew Yang. We're Yang in New Hampshire's left and right. This was great to see because the majority of the people here were Yang curious. Y'all saw that at the beginning of this thing. Oh my gosh, I had to haul ass to get over here, y'all. It's crazy. They were actually behind me all the way over here. So I had not only had to park and stuff. Oh man. I'm gonna see if I can maybe speak to Andrew for a moment. We will definitely interview some people at these events. We always do. My voice.
Everything else?
This is the lady from Fox who interviewed us, and she said the article will be out soon. Let's thank her very much. Crowd is thinning very fast, actually. Where did he go? So yeah, that detective. Dang it. I was going to, but he got outside and I can't, look, I haven't talked to Andrew in forever, so I'm gonna make sure that I get to speak to Andrew this time. Oh, dang. I still got it all pointed at me.
Probably have your information. I assume you written out the
Yes, make sure that y'all like, share, subscribe. Mama Yang Gang will put the link in the chat. She already has been, I saw, for donate. It's our Act Blue account we just got. So now y'all can donate directly to Andrew Yang's campaign. We're gonna see if we can get over here. You are so welcome, y'all. Y'all pay attention to the conversations that are going on here if y'all can. I know a lot of it's a jumble. Yes, for sure. If you have anything left over, you can donate to this channel. Donate to Mr. Andrew Yang. We're going to get around there to see.
Well, this is the week. This is the week.
That's true, and that is great that you come so far.
Look, y'all, he pulled up next to me. They were right next to me at the stoplight, and I looked at him and I was like, okay, Yang Gang. I was like, let's see if you can make it off the line before I do.
I don't have a cell phone for that, but I have a real photograph.
You're here, it'll take you 5 minutes to get a picture and it can be done.
Yeah.
And I don't know what, look, chances of becoming president relatively slim, but chances of being something like he's got a, and I go to a lot of these, so he's got a unique story. He's not your usual platitudes and the rhetoric that I hear from Democrats.
Yeah, it's a refreshing perspective. You know, and with the $1,000 a month thing, it's just kind of what? You know, people go, what? And the more I've thought about it, I think, I might have to put all my jobs here. I do all these jobs, I don't have a good solid time. You know, so just changing the dialogue.
Yeah, it is, well, it's a unique they may not, yeah, I agree with that, but they're not leading.
Yeah. So is he giving the phone number? Thank you.
Hey, you don't even have to, it's rolling.
Okay.
Just leave it rolling. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Awesome. Thanks.
My turn, man.
Oh, it's beautiful. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Donate through our new.
Sure thing. Hey, Yang Gang, donate through Grassroots Yang Gang new Ag Blue account. They got their own Ag Blue link. So fun and exciting. Fun, guys. Thanks, man. See you in a minute.
For real. All right, there you go, Yang Gang. I love Andrew, man. I'm telling you, it's been a long time since I've had an Andrew hug. I was feeling deprived, for sure. If y'all tune into these videos at any length of time, y'all already know. How I feel about Andrew. He's the man. Gen X to save the world, baby. Gen X to save the world. So, Gang Gang, we have one more live stream coming for you later today. Make sure that y'all tune in. Donate through our Act Blue link account. It is down below. Mama Yang Gang will put it in the description. If y'all are watching this later, if y'all got $1 left over, we appreciate it. Links are in the description. Click the little drop down box. Yang Gang, we love you. See y'all next one.